So everybody knows what's due when. Let's talk about chapter notes. How are we going to submit chapter notes? If you read the directions, you're going to put your notes, the chapter notes, in the bin on Tuesday. I believe it's due Tuesday. I think that's what I wrote. It's in the calendar. Something I want to show you. I'm going to show you in a minute. I'm going to go to Schoology, and I'm going to show you how to use the calendar. So I hope that calendar is very useful to you. That tells you when things are due. Did that help you with your issue was with how you didn't know how you're going to submit your notes? Is that right? Okay, so that's on Tuesday. So today, I want to review what we've covered so far and what we need to cover next. So let's go ahead and talk about. So we've covered a lot. We've talked about scientific method. And you see from the videos that are on the.
Are we still working on
Data Nuggets done. It's uploaded. It was uploaded last night. It's an hour and a half. Should I go to YouTube so you can see it all? Let me. So it's all there, and I emailed you to Jupiter Grades the YouTube channel, and I emailed you a copy of the video if you check on Jupiter Grades. So we went over the scientific method. I'm not going to go over it again. If you have any questions, I'll be here Wednesday afternoon and Thursday afternoon before the test for any tutoring that you might need, anything you're confused about. So we went through the scientific method. We went through how to analyze data, or at least started to talk about how to analyze data. All right, and we talked about, and we did an example called the data nugget, and we went into it in detail. We did like 3 days worth or 4 days worth of talking about it and going over it, and you guys worked on it on your own. So tomorrow you're going to have an experiment you have to play around with online, and there'll be some questions and answers. You have to submit those on Schoology. All right, so you'll need your computers, make sure they're charged or get somewhere, and remember to turn in before the end of the day, before the end of the period. All right, so one of the things your chapter talks about, because your chapter talks about these things, chapter one talks about these things. I felt it important that something they talked about that was, I think, really important for you, especially for our time, is this thing called pseudoscience. Anybody know what pseudo means? Fake, yeah. Fake science. And I don't like it because I don't like using the word fake, but you guys know it well, so we're going to use it. The reason I don't like using the word fake is how people are using it now. They overuse it, but it's not that they're, well, let's just talk about what, and of course, talking and writing is never a good idea, but what can I do? I have to do both. So it's fake science, and fake science has been responsible for a lot of things, and there's a lot of ways to fake science. You can fake science a lot of different ways. So fake science is responsible for things like cigarette companies, smoking. So smoking, a good part of the problem with smoking and cancer, lung cancer, and also heart disease and others comes from this fake science, this pseudoscience. A lot of problems with smoking. Drinking. People drinking alcohol. A lot of fake science has gone on, a lot of pseudoscience has gone on to support fake alcohol. There's a lot of examples, but I think a big one is anti-vaxxers. Is a big one. Racism. Racism is a real big deal. that in the result of racism, racism, first of all, I guess we got to start with how human nature is. We categorize things, right? We put things in boxes. That's how our brains work naturally. So when you see a bunch of things you're looking at, is it a rock? Is it a tree? Is it an animal? Is it you want to put things in something that you know so that you feel comfortable. So that's how the human brain works. But then someone used false science to support racism, and some examples of that of the Tuskegee Airmen. I'm sure I'm misspelling Tuskegee. I apologize. The Tuskegee Airmen is a good example. Yeah.
What does the third bullet point say?
Anti-vaxxers. Let's just leave the Tuskegee Airmen as an example. There's many others. But there have been a lot of claims about the differences between races. The fact is that race doesn't exist. It's not a thing. There's no such thing as a group called black people or white people or Hispanics. Hispanics is not a real thing. There's Puerto Ricans and there's Venezuelans and there's Mexicans. Those are real. There's African Americans. That's real. Those are cultures, right? And cultures and maybe even genetic populations. But biologically speaking, the thing called race is not a real thing. There's no such thing as Asians. It's not real. You have Chinese people. Even the Chinese people are broken up into Mongolians and Tibetans and in fact, did you know that there's multiple Chinese languages? Did you know there were multiple Chinese languages? There's multiple Chinese languages for a reason, because China is made up of several different populations. They're not one population. China is a government. There's a number of cultures in China, and there's a bunch of different populations. That, for instance, have you heard of the Mongols? Like Genghis Khan and those guys? Those are people. Have you watched Mulan at all? Yeah. Okay. The Mongols were the quote-unquote bad guys that were attacking China, the emperor. It's an oversimplification for the sake of a cartoon, but they're the reason why they built the Great Wall of China. But the reality is that that today, when you say Chinese, you're also talking about the Mongols, because they're all one group. As far as us as human beings categorizing them as groups. So racism is actually something that we do in order to help us understand the world and make us comfortable. When you look at someone and call them Chinese, they could be Japanese, they could be Korean, and most people really don't really care about the difference, right? It's just like they're Asian. Well, Asian is not a real thing, right? It's not, biologically speaking, what we're concerned with is genes, and what genes do you share and what genes are different, because that's what causes disease and what impacts your ability to treat disease. But holding people to these fake things called races actually hurt your ability to treat disease. So here's an example of what I'm saying. If you're African American, you share a certain set of genes. But that's only true if you're African American from the north. The African Americans from the south share a different set of, possibly a different set of genes. Have you heard of the African Americans from, I think it's North Carolina or South Carolina, some islands there? They speak a different language. They keep them to themselves for generations. I forget what they're called. I forget the name of the group. But it's culturally they've been separate for many generations. Their genes are going to be very different from yours. Most people that have been here in America for 6 generations have Caucasian or European genes in them. So if you're African American and you're in America for more than 6 generations, if your people go back a long ways, You have European genes in your genome. Does that make sense? Because there's been a mixing of the people over many generations, right? Some great-great-grandmother had a baby with a European guy, and their genes are in your family lineage from then on. Does that make sense? However, if someone's from Africa, like maybe Nigeria or from Congo or something like that, and they came over, their parents came over and they grew up here, they're American, right? They're of African descent, correct? But their genes are very different from an African American person who grew up here. Am I making sense to you? So their genes are going to be different. So they're going to have different reactions to medicines. They're going to have different issues. African Americans and Hispanics actually share a lot of issues. We share a lot of genes, especially if the Hispanics have been here for many generations. Hispanics in general in America, the Puerto Ricans, for instance, have a large sharing of these genetic lineages. And one of the things that Hispanics and African Americans share a problem with is diabetes and high blood pressure. Like that's two big health issues that, now, is that true of people from Nigeria? Is that true of people from Congo? I don't know. So when I say race isn't a real thing, it can really be harmful. If I have a drug that works with someone from that's African American, will it work as well with someone from Nigeria? I don't know, because the genes are significantly different. The alleles are significantly different. So that's where race becomes an issue. That's where it can influence your, as a physician, as a future physician, as a future nurse. This should be informing you of some possible issues that you might have to deal with. But fake science has led to these problems in our society. There's more, but we'll just stop there. Let's take a look at anti-vaxxers. Vaccines. In order to understand vaccines, we have to start with a little bit of history. Is that right? So vaccines started, the history of vaccines started with, well, as far as I know, started with the smallpox epidemic. Smallpox is a viral infection. It was killing thousands, tens of thousands of people. Smallpox likely caused the death of, or the decrease, a severe decrease in Native American populations in a lot of the European, Yeah, a lot of the poxes are similar. I'm not sure what the actual biological similarities are. I know that they're all viruses, and they're probably from the same family. So we group viruses into families. Like, for instance, you've heard of herpes. Yes? The virus called herpes. There's herpes simplex 1 is a cold sore. So if you have a cold sore, you've been infected by herpes. Chickenpox is in the same family as herpes. Genital herpes, which is a similar outbreak as cold sores, but on your genitals, is also herpes virus. They're all different viruses in the sense that they attack different tissues, but they still impact humans. So it turns out that getting herpes later in life can cause other diseases. For instance, if you get chickenpox later in life, you get something called shingles. The virus can go dormant in your nervous system, and then later in life when you're stressed out, it attacks your nervous system, and these people have extreme pain events where they have to deal with extreme pain for a long time. It feels like their skin's on fire for a long time. Some people, it's chronic, for years. My wife had shingles for a short period. Thank God it was a short period, and she took some antivirals and I think she got vaccinated as well, and it helped. And so it's all gone. But shingles can come back. Chickenpox today, the virus can go dormant in your DNA and come back out later. That's scary. Have you heard of MS? No. It's called multiple sclerosis. It's an attack on the nervous system that causes your body to have an autoimmune reaction, and you start to destroy your own nervous system. My brother died of MS. I don't know if you heard of Montel Williams at all. He's a Montel. No, he was a talk show host back in the '90s. He got MS. You should. I think you must have. He dated Kamala Harris. Yeah, he dated Kamala Harris. Let me pause this for a second. No, that wasn't my brother. No, Montel Williams is not my brother. Oh, if he was my brother, I think it would be the coolest thing in the world. But no, he's not. I liked Montel Williams' show. I think it was really well done. But he had MS. He still has MS, and he's alive. My brother had a more severe version of it, and he died of it, and getting COVID. So the bottom line is that MS is caused by the herpes simplex infection when you're young. Later in life, your body reacts to that virus and starts to destroy your own nervous system. By the way, it's more prevalent in women than in men, but men do get it, as you can see my brother and Montel Williams. So smallpox was a big problem, and very much like monkeypox or chicken pox or other kinds of poxes. They cause pus, little raised areas that looks like, have you seen someone with chicken pox?
I see monkeypox.
You see monkeypox? Do you guys know what I'm talking about? Would you like to see it?
No.
All right, let's. Smallpox is a real problem. Today it's not such a big problem here. And I'm going to show you. Can you guess why? Can you guess why smallpox? We don't see that. If we hadn't developed vaccines, you would know at least 3 people with that issue. If you weren't one of them, you would have seen someone die of smallpox by now. We have epidemics, repeated epidemics throughout history of smallpox because it keeps coming back, going away, coming back, like the flu, right? Except unlike the flu, your body gets all those pox on your body, and a lot of people die. So it's a real serious problem. Young, old, middle-aged, didn't matter. So smallpox was the issue. So what people found out, and don't ask me how they knew this. Don't ask me how they figured it out. But here's what would happen during the Revolution. We're talking about during the American Revolution. So, because at the time, have you heard of someone called John Adams? The actual president, the founding father of the United States of America. He was one of the founding fathers. Yeah, John Adams. He was with Benjamin Franklin, those guys. He went to Europe to petition for money. So John Adams he was a Quaker. Do you know what Quakers are? Do you know why they're famous? Ladies, let's focus. Let's close our computers. That's enough with the computers. We don't need them. Do you know what Quakers are famous for? For quaking. Yeah, for Quaker oats, yeah. For quaking in church. They would quake. They would be filled with the Holy Spirit and they would quake. I'm just saying that's what they would do. They're also famous because they believed in the Bible. They believed in interpretation of the Bible that was against racism. They were anti-race. They were anti-slavery before the Civil War. They fought very hard. They argued in Congress. In fact, John Adams argued that in the Constitution, in the forming of the Declaration of Independence, that we should free the slaves. So these guys were real people that really believed in what they said. So John Adams was one of these guys. I say that because I was impressed. I read his biography and I was really impressed with that. Because imagine everyone around you. Thomas Jefferson has slaves, Washington has slaves, and you're one of the founding fathers and you're like, this is wrong. He's speaking up to the power before it was, the doctor, I get exposed to the flu. Great. All right. So anyways, smallpox was a real problem. And during the Revolutionary War, the people were getting sick. While John Adams was in Paris negotiating for help against the British, his little baby girl died of smallpox infections. So smallpox was a real problem. In fact, his wife told him she's taking the kids to what used to be called smallpox parties. And what they would do in a smallpox party is they would get together and someone who was ill, who actually had smallpox, would be invited.
That's outrageous.
And then as they're sitting there sick, obviously fever, smallpox all over their body, that somebody would get with a needle and poke a pustule, one of the little bumps, and they would pull out some of the pus and then inject a healthy person.
That is disgusting.
They were desperate. They were desperate. People were dying to get sick. Why did they do that? Because when they did that, a lot of people, if not most people that did it, would get sick, but they would get sick, but not as bad. So they would get sick, but they wouldn't necessarily die. Maybe they wouldn't get as heavy a pox on their skin. It would get sick and then get better. The people that got it naturally without getting that little injection, they would get sick and possibly die. So why did they get sick and not die? Or why didn't they get sick as bad? Well, here's what happens. And by the way, acne works very similarly. So when you have acne on your skin, you have a little bump, a zit, and you pop the zit, and up comes that white pus. Okay? So what happens with all these things is you have these cells, and we'll talk about cells next. You have these cells called white blood cells.
White blood cells.
Yeah. Now, white blood cells are very interesting. They're different from red blood cells. Red blood cells carry oxygen, and we'll talk about what that is. But white blood cells, what they do is attack invaders. Anything that comes into your body that doesn't belong in your body, your white blood cells attack it. They kill it. They remember. There are immune cells that remember. They're called memory cells. They actually remember what your enemy looks like. Their whole job is to remember what the enemy looks like. So if you get infected by a certain strain of bacteria, you have a white blood cell that has the memory of that bacteria in it, and it's waiting. As soon as it gets a notice that something that looks like this bacteria comes into your body, they send in the troops. White blood cells. White blood cells, they have these things called antibodies and white blood cells. White blood cells, they do something called phagocytosis. So if you have little bacteria like this, you're giant, they're pretty big, but these white blood cells, what they do is they surround it, and what do you think they're going to do with it? That's right, that's exactly what they do. They eat them and they digest them and they break it down. In doing so, what happens when there's a big infection, it's a war. So like in any war, there are casualties. A lot of the white blood cells do end up dying. So they take the little bacteria into their bodies, and then they use these little organelles called lysosomes. That have killer enzymes in them, and they kill the bacteria. They break it all down. And we'll talk about lysosomes and proteins and bacteria and cells. So by the end of the white blood cell, By the time the white blood cells down, they kill billions of bacteria, viruses, or what have you.
Can you zoom into that word?
Lysosomes, L-Y. That's messy, I apologize. Let me rewrite that. Lysosomes are these little packets of killer enzymes that when they fuse with the vesicle that the white blood cell took into itself, they kill everything inside it. Very, very deadly little things. When you have a skin pustule, when you have acne, what it is your inside, underneath your skin. Let me use a different color. Underneath your skin, you have bacteria growing. It's swelling. The reason the bacteria are eating you. They're eating the fat that comes out of your sweat. They get trapped in your sweat glands, and they multiply. And they start to eat you. They're eating you. They're multiplying. So what does your body do? Your body has blood vessels all along. You know you have blood vessels everywhere, right? Right? Yes? All right. Tubes that carry blood near the area. They open up little channels. They open up these little channels. And through those little openings, out come the white blood cells. The white blood cells ooze out. They can move. They move around in your bloodstream, and they come out of your bloodstream and go and they attack the bacteria. That liquid and the cells going in there, that makes the area raise up. So you get a bump. You call it a zit. It gets irritable.
I'll call it a pimple.
Or a pimple, yes. A zit or a pimple. It'll get reddish, right? It gets a little red, inflamed. Why is it red? Because there's more blood in that area. Why is there more blood in that area? Because the blood vessels are swelling up. Why are they swelling up? Because they're letting the white blood cells in. Now the white blood cells are killing the bacteria. The bacteria are weakened, right? The numbers are low. The numbers of bacteria or virus, it could be a virus like in smallpox, the numbers are low. Over some time, and the longer you let it go, the more red, the bigger the pustule. What happens is that the thing swells up, it's ready to pop, as you say, as the famous pimple popper doctor, or whatever she's called, whatever. These blood cells, the white blood cells are dead. Some of them white blood cells are dead. There's a lot of white blood cells. Some of them are still eating the bacteria or viruses. Some of them, it's literally a killing field. All right. Some of the bacteria are there, or viruses are there, but they're hurt. They're dead. Everybody's weakened. So everything in this pustule. Everything in this pustule is weakened. The attackers are weakened. Right? Does that make sense? Now, these people during the Revolutionary War didn't know any of this. We know this today. But the attackers are weakened, so when they poked that needle in the pustule of the sick person they invited to the smallpox party, and they injected you who didn't have smallpox, they were injecting you with what? The weakened vector, the weakened disease-causing thing. It's weak. So when your body got infected by a weak virus, by a virus that's been attacked by white blood cells, then you didn't get as sick. Does that make sense? So they learned that. They did that back in the Revolutionary War. Later, during a polio epidemic, have you heard of polio?
Yeah.
It's a really deadly. Let me show you some. We'll finish this discussion on Tuesday. And I just wanted to make sure you understood the science behind vaccines, the reasons why the vaccines work, and then I want to show you the false science behind a lot of the anti-vaxxer movement. looked at the percentages, when you looked at the percentages of the odds of people surviving, it increased when they got injected by this pus from these infections. So that was the original vaccination. And as far as I know, there might have been an earlier one, but that's as far as I know. Now, what did we do after that? Some time came along, and there's this disease called polio. Have you ever heard of polio? Let me show you what polio looks like. So polio was hitting the U.S. pretty hard. Whole neighborhoods, like I said, you know what? Let me